Chris, leatherhelp.com. In this video, we're going to take a quick look at the different kinds of leather that you either may buy or you already own. It's important to know what kind of leather or vinyl you own, because choosing the right leather or caring for your leather and making decisions about repairing your leather depends a lot on knowing what kind of leather it is that you have. So we'll go through each kind and we'll do a few quick tests so that you can tell pretty easily what leather type you have. Okay, so when we're talking about different types of leather here, there's a few quick tests that we can go through. First, you're going to have finished leather. This is what most of you will have. 90% of people, 90% of the leather sold at furniture stores and garments, most all of the automotive leather is made of this kind of finished leather. It's going to have a finish on it, which means it has the leather hide, then it has a color finish sprayed onto it, and then it has a clear coat protection coating on there. So there's a couple different tests to tell for sure if you have finished leather. One is a water test, and if you do this yourself, you should use distilled water so it doesn't have any contaminants in it that could stain the leather. But if you put a drip of water on finished leather, it should roll right off. It should not penetrate, should not change the color, should not affect the leather at all. Okay? The second test is a scratch test. If you scratch finished leather, shouldn't have much change in that leather at all. It should handle scratches well and not change. Okay? And it can be in many different colors and sizes and shapes. That's finished leather. The next type of leather that you may see quite a bit less often is going to be a pull-up leather. A pull-up leather is a leather that has dye applied to it, so you see it's dyed through. Then there's sometimes some spray color, or some color applied, and a wax or an oil is rubbed into that to give it a two-tone, a molted look, a distressed look. And the way you can tell a pull-up leather is when you scratch it, it makes a distinct mark. And you can usually rub that out with just your fingertip or with some other products that we'll talk about in other videos. If you use the drip test on a pull-up leather, it will usually sit up on the surface. Now after a while that water will seep in if you press firmly, but most pull-up leathers can take a little bit of moisture without staining the leather. That's pull-up leather. The third thing you'll see a lot of, and this you'll see a lot of, is a vinyl. Now vinyls can often look just like leather. It can be hard to tell just from the surface whether it's leather or a vinyl. It's got color applied to it. It looks like it has a finish on it. Some vinyls even feel like leather. But the difference is, if you can find a place to get behind the vinyl, sometimes you open a zipper or sometimes you look under a cushion and you'll be able to see the background. And it's going to be a man-made material. It's going to be a stuffing or a weave. Where with the leather, the underside is a suede material, which is part of the natural characteristics of the cowhide. Again, with the drip test, vinyls will certainly keep off the moisture. It won't absorb, so you're safe there. Know that. Alright? Another kind. This is less common. This is a more high-end leather. This is more of what we would call an unfinished, or you could call an aniline leather. It's got dye in the finished hide, and it sometimes have a tiny bit of clear coat put on there, but very little, so that when you apply a drip test to this kind of leather, if you let it sit for a little while or press it into the leather, then it will change the color of the leather. Now, for the most part, if we try this in an inconspicuous area on our leather, it will dry without leaving a stain of any sort. It might not hurt to take a hair dryer and dry that moisture out so it doesn't leave a moisture ring. But that's the key to knowing that you have an unfinished or an aniline leather. And again, you have to treat that and clean that very differently than you would the other kinds, aniline or unfinished leather. Two other that you may run into on occasion are suede. And suede is simply the flipping over the underside of a hide. It's the more nappy tight side of the leather. So you'll know if you have a thick nap like this that you may have a suede product. And finally, there's nubuck. Nubuck is actually the top side of the hide, but then they brush it over with sandpaper, and it creates this smooth feel with a two-tone effect. I'm not sure if you can see it there, but if you brush it one way, it's one color. If you brush it the other way, it's the other color. Drip test on this will darken this leather. So sometimes you can apply protective coatings on this, but generally, naturally, this is not protected leather, so water will absorb into this leather.